Well, to discuss this, I'm joined now from Cape Town by Ebrahim Rasool. He's the former South African ambassador to the US and was the Premier of the Western Cape. And from Johannesburg, we have political analyst Oliver Dickson. Gentlemen, great to have you on the Newsmakers. I regret to inform you both that we had Zwanele Jimmy Manyi booked for the show. He pulled out just a few minutes ago. I was looking forward to him having a dialogue with the two of you gentlemen. Of course, he's a close Zuma and Gupta ally as well. Big news for the country. It's been a fascinating few days. Ebrahim Rasool, tell me why President Jacob Zuma has not decided to go along with the party's wishes.
Look, I think that it is an enormous day. I think that he woke up this morning not only with the recall letter in hand asking him to resign by the African National Congress, but he also woke up to the news that the Gupta home had been raided, that Ajay Gupta had been taken in for questioning or arrested. And so I think that the stakes are really great for someone like him. He would want 3 to 6 months, as he has asked, to, I think, smooth over things, maybe get the nuclear deal off the ground, maybe ensure that evidence is not available, and so forth. And I think that he may be surprised by the usually overcautious ANC. He may be surprised by the fact that it is moving so decisively.
Okay, that's really interesting. Oliver, do you agree with that, that perhaps there's some method behind the madness right now? He needs 3 to 6 months to sort things out, because it might actually be more than him just needing to resign, but he might actually face legal trouble.
Right. So I think Ebrahim Rasool is well within his right to speculate what the reasons may be for Jacob Zuma wanting to linger on a bit longer. We have very little information, so I guess we're all going to have to speculate as far and as best as we possibly can and anchor it in some sort of fact somewhere. But I think what Jacob Zuma asked for seems reasonable, and he and Cyril Ramaphosa had a principled agreement that what he had asked for was a reasonable request, and that they would execute it as that. Cyril Ramaphosa received excess pressure from not only his NEC internally, but various factors in the media, various international investors who we would have spoken to in Davos in Switzerland at the World Economic Forum a few weeks ago. So that would have mounted a bit more pressure into cutting down the time for Jacob Zuma, and would have put a halt on the principled agreement that Jacob Zuma and Cyril Ramaphosa had. And I think it's important to consider that. But I do think legal action may become an option to Jacob Zuma, if he were to consider it. But I don't think he's got much grounds for that, because what they would pursue would be Section 89 of the Constitution or Section 102 of the Constitution, which are well within the right of Parliament to ensue at any given time they feel pleased to do so. And I don't think, he would successfully be able to challenge that in the High Court, nevertheless in the Constitutional Court.
Okay, I want to get Ebrahim to respond to that, but I want him to respond after we listen to Jacob Zuma. This is him giving an interview to, well, I don't know if it was an interview. It was a speech. There weren't too many questions. This was to the SABC, South Africa State Broadcaster. Have a little listen.
What have I done in this kind of situation? Because the system, the policy, nothing has interfered. What I even asked, what is this hurry? What are you rushing for?
Okay, so Ebrahim, what are you rushing for? What have I done wrong? Is this a man who's actually delusional with no self-awareness, or does he have a point? And maybe, okay, so the party has replaced the leadership. That's fine. There's an election coming next year. Why is everybody in such a big rush to get rid of Jacob Zuma? Why not let him serve his term and, as expected, have Cyril Ramaphosa become the president when, as expected, the ANC will probably win in the next election?
Look, I think that what you're dealing with is an ANC that feels liberated. I think over this dark decade of Jacob Zuma's presidency, in the first term of his, he had charmed the pants off those who were elected with him at Polokwane and governed with him. I think that as that term went on and he went to his second term, there were serious misgivings about whether this man's intentions were honest, whether his actions were honest, and whether he should be the president and then opposition started mounting. Towards the conference in Nasrec in December last year, suddenly they saw that there was a critical mass of people who opposed Jacob Zuma. He had embarrassed the party, that we lost the metros in South Africa, we could lose the 2019 elections as the African National Congress, and that for the first time, the ANC has not for the first time been in political or organizational crises, but for the first time, the ANC found itself in a deep moral crisis. And this was unsustainable to veterans of the movement as well as members of the movement. And so the question is, how soon can we get this man's hand off power? And how can we make sure that the country is not going to be subjected to too much time with him at the helm for him to push through nuclear deals and maybe even embark on a scorched earth policy with the resources of the state.
Yeah, and of course, I don't want to sort of go down a rabbit hole, but the nuclear deal that you're referring to, for the sake of our viewers, involves the Russians, and the opposition to it is that it's wasting too much of South African taxpayer money. Oliver, Ebrahim's talking about the fact that the party feels they need to clean house, right? They need to sort themselves out because the writing is on the wall under Jacob Zuma, and that's why they need to expedite this process. So is that reasonable then to think that this is why they're rushing, and this is why they want to get Cyril Ramaphosa in the hot seat as quickly as possible in order to sort it out?
Let's be honest here. If the ANC was serious about, cleaning out, Jacob Zuma wouldn't be the only official they would be getting rid of. Because if it's true that he is corrupt and has been corrupt, he certainly wasn't corrupt alone. He certainly would have had ministers, director generals, deputy director generals, perhaps even deputy ministers as his accomplices throughout his criminal network. So getting rid of Jacob Zuma is not really restoring the moral crisis Ebrahim describes the ANC to be in. So I don't think the ANC is genuine about cleaning out. What I do think, however, is happening is just a natural process of wanting to consolidate power as quickly as possible. Right? So there's a fear in the ANC that Jacob Zuma may push through for the nuclear deal, as Ebrahim describes. Some even assume that he would push through certain boards onto certain state-owned enterprises through a proxy in the Ministry of Finance. So those are all likely things that the ANC wants to avoid, because Ace Magashule, the Secretary General's statement was very clear yesterday that the National Executive Council does not think Jacob Zuma has done anything wrong. They're not removing him because they think he's done anything wrong. But in the other instance, they speak about restoring the dignity of the party, the integrity of the party, and rebuilding the image. Surely someone must have eroded the integrity, dignity, and image of the party. So why are you then saying this person's done nothing wrong and then want to get rid of him? So there's a disingenuity in the ANC at the moment, and I think that's going to cause deep divisions within the ANC come to 2019 elections. More importantly, if this motion of no confidence passes, which removes Jacob Zuma, it certainly will remove Jacob Zuma. I think we can all, wave goodbye to Jacob Zuma right now. But what we must welcome is deeper divisions within the ANC, because people who want to maintain the favor and proximity they had to the presidency by being appointed as minister of a certain department, various ministries of certain departments, will now want to consolidate power outside of the Cyril Ramaphosa faction, particularly ministers who are currently ministers but aren't favorable to Cyril Ramaphosa.
Okay,
those ministers could include our Minister of Social Development, Bathabile Dlamini.
Right. Interesting points. Ebrahim, is the ANC seemingly speaking with a forked tongue here because they are disingenuous, as Oliver says, or maybe they're just trying to be diplomatic in this process and not say too many mean things about the president, but push him out at the same time?
Look, we are dealing with a situation that has grown over the last decade and more. I think, secondly, the cleanup also involves raids on the Free State government offices. So I think what you need to do is to understand the systematic way the dominoes will fall. I have no doubt that once the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture happens, once the new Director of Public Prosecutions is in place, I think we will begin to see far more systematic things. And I think Oliver is right to maintain that kind of pressure for the ANC to remain a party of integrity and to put their deed to their word.
Right.
I think, secondly, it is very difficult for some people in the ANC to say an unequivocal message. Yesterday we heard that there was no time frame. Today we know that there is a deadline, that he must resign by tonight or face tomorrow. I think we're awaiting a second press conference or an address to the nation by the president. He may take the opportunity to resign in order not to be the subject of a vote of no confidence tomorrow. I also think that part of the urgency is that we need to get the country back on track economically. The rand is responding in a particular way. The investing market is responding in a particular way. But more importantly, our people have hope again for the first time. And so 2019's contests will be the ultimate test by the voting public. But I think that if you did a test on the optimism levels of South Africans, we are beginning to regain our sense of optimism. We must just guard against the undue euphoria and expectations that we can get things right in the shortest possible period of time. I want to add one last bit to it. I think that while in many of the institutions of the state and departments of the state, the top levels have been compromised, I am picking up that the middle and middle senior levels of the public service are now doing their job without fear of intimidation from the top levels imposed by the administration over the last decade. And that is why you can have the asset forfeiture unit suddenly producing the list of assets that must be forfeited by certain individuals. That's why charge sheets are coming out against certain individuals. That's why we have an arrest this morning. And so I think that there's enough evidence that the equivocation of the ANC in the past is giving way, even if there are still voices of equivocation that occupy senior seats. But the time will come as the dominoes fall.
Right. Oliver, do you feel the same level of optimism with regards to the future?
I think Ebrahim's conflating issues that have nothing to do with each other at the moment. The arrest, the raid on the Gupta premises this morning has nothing to do with the recall of Jacob Zuma. That's an arrest and a raid that would have happened anyway, because the Vrede Dairy Farm investigation has been ongoing for a couple of weeks now. So that was a natural process to happen anyway. Just because Jacob Zuma is being recalled on the same day the Gupta's homes were raided does not mean that governance is suddenly starting to happen. I think Ebrahim is naive to the fact how deep the rot has sank into the ANC. The ANC is at a point of irretrievable damage, at a point where corruption it doesn't just exist around Jacob Zuma. There are networks within the ANC unrelated to Jacob Zuma that are equally corrupt, equally looting from the state coffers, and who may not even come under the radar of investigators. So the Hawks may not even investigate them. The investigations may be thrown out on insufficient evidence. So I don't think the future is as optimistic as being painted out right now. I think we still have a long way to go. I think the ANC still has a lot to fix within itself before it can look to fix the rest of South Africa.
Ebrahim, usually it's the older guy telling the younger guy you're naive. Ebrahim, tell me why you disagree here with Oliver and you feel that Oliver's maybe being a bit too cynical. He says it's just a coincidence that there was a raid on the Gupta home on the day that the ANC had recalled Jacob Zuma.
Look, the simple test is, would this have happened under Jacob Zuma firmly in the seat, controlling both centers of power? I don't think so. And so it may not have been timed together, because that would be a conspiracy, that the day he receives his letter of recall is the day when the Hawks strike on the Guptas. I don't think that that's what the constitutional state does. But I do believe that there is a coincidence in the confidence of law enforcement to take on impunity in this country. And he's absolutely right. This is a long haul. We must, and that's why I say we must guard against undue expectation and euphoria. I'm not asking for that. I'm simply saying that if we don't show the kind of optimism now, we will take the pressure on people and who believe that we can go on with a kind of pace of change and degeneration of the last 10 years. And we certainly must pick it up so that we can get back to dealing with the basic stuff of service delivery, of getting the economy growing, of making sure that there's equitable development across the length and breadth of our country. And I think that let's not predict the election result. Let's wait for that election result. I think certainly the ANC knows it has to work hard, that it has built a sentiment of positivity. We haven't regained the trust yet of people. It's still a wait and see. And that's the humble work that must be done by every ANC cadre, and that is what Cyril Ramaphosa, I am sure, is absolutely convinced by. He first has to win the trust before he can win the support of the South African public. He first has to win the trust of the international investor community before he can win the investments.
Oliver, does Cyril Ramaphosa have your trust?
Look, I would be very disingenuous if I were to separate Cyril Ramaphosa from the ANC and speak of it as though they are two different entities. I think the ANC has in large part lost the trust of South Africans. I think there are incredibly great administrators in the ANC who have the capacity and capability to regain the trust of South Africans. For instance, our Minister of Police has done an amazing job at cleaning up the Ministry of Police in a very short space of time. Our Minister of Finance went to Davos and spoke with great confidence to investors and have secured quite a number of investment pockets for the country. So I do think there are amazing administrators within the ANC, but I do think that the infighting in the ANC certainly will continue for a longer time, and that may see them dip lower than the 62% in the next election that they currently have. The ANC only has 50% of South Africa's confidence if we were to use the numbers from our local government election 2 years ago. So importantly, you need to ask yourself, how much closer to 50% is the ANC going to drop? And if they drop below 50%, we may see a coalition government coming into, which may exist of opposition parties come in 2019.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting.
A great possibility at this time.
Yeah, that would be really fascinating if, for example, the EFF on the sort of far left and the DA, which is kind of centrist, have to go into a coalition. That would be totally fascinating. That's why I stay in this business, because I'm looking forward to interesting news like that if it ever happens. Ebrahim, I want to look back for a moment before I leave you both, because I have to move on with the show here. But I want to look back for a second. The first time I met you, Ebrahim, you were South African ambassador to the United States. You've spoken about the rot that set in for a long, long time. And as somebody who was representing the country and someone who reported to President Jacob Zuma during that time when you were South African ambassador to the UN, was there any particular moment where you felt it became a moral crisis and it was becoming difficult for you to represent this country, or rather this country as run by this man?
I had the opportunity in the middle of my term to say to my superiors in international relations that when I sit in Washington and I represent South Africa at as an ambassador, that I represent a constitution, I represent a nation, I represent a vision and a cause, and I'm appointed by a president. And it comes because I think that when I was in the Western Cape and we went up to Polokwane, we were a province with a majority that voted against Jacob Zuma because we had certain misgivings about what he was standing for. So I knew what I was into, and I knew exactly who I was also, or what I was representing in the United States. And I dare say that that was a message that resonated across the US as we dealt with things. So I have no qualms about saying that.
Okay, Ebrahim Rasool and Oliver Dickson, I thank you both for joining us. Hope to have you again on the Newsmakers. It's been fascinating picking your brains. Thanks again.